I stood in the elegant lobby of the lakeside resort, our family's pride for 3 generations, trying to process the bomb my brother Michael had just dropped. The morning sun streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows felt suddenly cold, despite the warm April day outside. "You did what?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Michael lounged against the antique reception desk, wearing that familiar smirk that had always preceded trouble since we were kids. "I sold the hotel to Emma," he repeated, referring to his wife of 2 years, "for $1. It's all perfectly legal, Sarah. Dad left me in charge, remember?" I did remember. Just 3 weeks ago, at our father's funeral, Michael had proudly announced that Dad had named him CEO in his final days. I'd been too grief-stricken to question it then, focused on holding myself together as we buried the man who taught us everything about the hospitality business. "Legal?" I almost laughed. "You sold a $5 million property for $1 without consulting the board. Without consulting me?" I was the hotel's CFO, though Michael had been doing his best to sideline me since Dad's passing. "The board approved it yesterday," he said, examining his manicured nails. "Emergency meeting. Must have slipped my mind to invite you." Of course it had. Just like it had slipped his mind to invite me to the executive dinner last week, or the staff meeting before that. But this was different. This wasn't just another power play. This was theft, plain and simple. "Why?" I demanded. "Why would you do this?" Emma chose that moment to walk in, her designer heels clicking against the marble floor. She'd never worked a day in the hotel business before marrying Michael. But that hadn't stopped her from criticizing everything from our historic decor to our long-term staff. "Because the hotel needs a fresh direction, darling," she said, sliding her arm through Michael's. "And let's be honest, you're a bit stuck in the past. All this old-world charm." She gestured dismissively at the hand-carved wooden panels our grandfather had installed. "It's outdated. We need to modernize, attract a younger crowd." I looked between them. These two people who'd somehow convinced themselves they were doing something right. Dad wouldn't have wanted this. "Dad's not here," Michael snapped, his smirk finally dropping. "And he chose me to lead, not you. You've always been too cautious, too afraid to take risks. This hotel needs bold moves to survive." Bold moves. That's what he called it when he fired our head chef last month. A man who worked here for 20 years. And when he canceled the holiday bonus program for the staff. All bold moves that had nothing to do with improvement and everything to do with padding his own pockets. "The board will never stand for this," I said, though uncertainty crept in. The board had been oddly compliant with Michael's decisions lately, and I was beginning to suspect why. "The board already approved it," Emma reminded me with false sweetness. "Unanimously. Maybe if you'd attended the meeting." I turned away from them, walking to the wall where photographs of our family's history with the hotel hung. My great-grandfather breaking ground in 1952. My grandfather at the grand opening. Dad, Michael, and me as kids, playing in the lobby while Mom worked the front desk. So many memories, so much history, and Michael was ready to throw it all away for what? A quick profit. The chance to let his wife play hotelier. But as I stared at those photos, something caught my eye. A detail in one of the older pictures, something Dad had pointed out to me years ago, but I'd forgotten until now. Something that could change everything. "Well," I said, keeping my voice steady as I turned back to them, "I hope you've read all the documentation carefully. Every deed, every contract, every amendment." Michael's smirk faltered for just a moment. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing," I said, already planning my next move. "Just, congratulations on your purchase, Emma. $1 is quite a bargain." I walked out of the lobby, ignoring Michael calling after me. I had work to do. And for once, I was grateful for my tendency to document everything. Dad had taught me that, the importance of keeping good records. "In this business, Sarah," he'd said, "the paperwork tells the real story." And somewhere in my office, buried in 20 years of paperwork, was a document that would wipe those smug smiles right off their faces. I just had to find it. The drive to my apartment was a blur of anger and determination. How dare they? How dare Michael take our family's legacy and treat it like a toy to be handed to his wife? Emma, who'd once said our traditional afternoon tea service was quaint in a sad way. Emma, who wanted to turn our elegant dining room into a modern fusion space. My hands shook as I unlocked my door, but not from fear. No, this was anticipation. Because while Michael had always been the charming one, the one who could talk his way into or out of anything, I was the one who paid attention to the details. I went straight to my home office, to the filing cabinet where I kept copies of everything important. Michael might have called it paranoid, but Dad had called it prudent. Always keep your own copies, he'd said. Trust, but verify. The file I was looking for dated back to 1982, when our grandfather had restructured the hotel's ownership. Michael probably hadn't even known it existed. He'd never had the patience for diving into old documents. But I remembered Dad showing it to me during my first year working at the hotel, explaining why it was so important. It took me 2 hours of searching, but finally there it was. The Lakeside Resort's original incorporation documents, with a very specific clause about ownership transfers. I read it 3 times to be sure, a smile spreading across my face. Then I called Maria Torres, our family's longtime lawyer. Sarah, she answered warmly. I was hoping you'd call. I heard about the sale. Did you know about the meeting? I asked, trying to keep the accusation out of my voice. She sighed. I did. Michael asked me not to tell you. I should have anyway. But he's the CEO, I finished. I understand. But Maria, I need your help. I found something interesting in the original incorporation documents. Oh, I could hear papers rustling on her end. What kind of something? Section 7, paragraph 3, I said, reading from the yellowed page. Any transfer of ownership must be approved by a unanimous board vote, including all living direct descendants of the original founder. There was a long pause. Then Maria said, very quietly, direct descendants. Yes, I said, my smile growing. Not their spouses, not their friends. Direct descendants. And you're a direct descendant, Maria said slowly. The sale wasn't valid without your approval. Exactly, and there's more. Keep reading. I heard more papers shuffling, then a sharp intake of breath. Sarah, this is, I know, I said. Michael wants to play games. Fine, let's play. I spent the next few hours going through every document I had, building my case. The more I dug, the more ammunition I found. It wasn't just the ownership transfer clause. There were other irregularities in how Michael had been handling things since Dad's death. The emergency board meeting hadn't followed proper notification procedures. The sale price of $1 would trigger automatic IRS scrutiny. And most importantly, I found evidence that Michael had been moving money around between accounts in ways that didn't quite add up. By midnight, my dining room table was covered in papers, and I had a clear picture of what needed to be done. I just needed one more thing: access to the hotel's financial records from the past month. Records that were kept in my office at the hotel. I glanced at the clock. The night manager, Joe, would be on duty now. Joe, who'd started as a bellhop when I was still in high school, who'd always had a soft spot for me because I'd helped him study for his management certification. I picked up my phone and dialed the hotel's private line. Lakeside Resort, this is Joe speaking. Joe, it's Sarah. I need a favor. An hour later, I was sitting in my office at the hotel, going through files on my computer. Joe had let me in through the service entrance, no questions asked. Whatever you need, Miss Sarah, he'd said. Some of us remember who really runs this place. The financial records confirmed what I'd suspected. Michael hadn't just been sidelining me. He'd been preparing for this move for weeks, maybe months. Small transfers, subtle changes to the books, all leading up to this moment. I was making copies of everything when I heard voices in the hallway. Familiar voices. I'm telling you, Emma, it's fine, Michael was saying. Sarah can dig through all the paperwork she wants. Dad left me in charge, and that's all that matters. I quickly gathered my documents and slipped out the back door of my office, nodding my thanks to Joe as I passed the front desk. Let them think I was at home, licking my wounds. Let them think they'd won. Tomorrow, they'd learn exactly why Dad had always said I was the smart one. The next morning, I arrived at the hotel just before the executive board meeting was scheduled to begin. Michael had conveniently forgotten to invite me again. But as CFO, I had every right to be there. More than that, after what I discovered last night, I had an obligation to be there. I walked into the boardroom exactly 5 minutes before 9, wearing my sharpest suit and carrying a leather portfolio filled with evidence. The reaction was immediate and telling. Michael, at the head of the table, froze mid-sentence. Emma, sitting in what used to be my seat, turned pale. And the board members, mostly old friends of our father, suddenly found their coffee cups fascinating. "Good morning," I said pleasantly, taking the only empty seat. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything." "Sarah," Michael recovered quickly, flashing his trademark smile. "We weren't expecting you." "Clearly," I said, laying my portfolio on the table. "But as CFO, I thought I should be present for any discussions about our financial future, especially given yesterday's interesting development." Bernard Wells, our longest-serving board member, cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Michael assured us you were aware of the situation." "Oh, I'm very aware now," I said, opening my portfolio. "In fact, I spent the night becoming aware of quite a few things. Would anyone like to see what I've found?" Emma stood up abruptly. "This is inappropriate. The sale has been approved by a board meeting that violated our bylaws." I cut in smoothly. "No proper notice was given, and more importantly," I pulled out the incorporation documents and slid them across the table to Bernard. "Section 7, paragraph 3 makes the entire sale invalid." Bernard put on his reading glasses, squinting at the paper. His eyes widened. "Direct descendants must unanimously approve any transfer of ownership," I finished. "I am a direct descendant of our founder. I did not approve this sale. Therefore, it's not valid." Michael's smile had disappeared completely now. "That's an old document. Things have changed." "It's never been amended," I said. "I checked with state records this morning. It's still binding." The room fell silent as Bernard passed the document around. I could see the moment each board member realized what they'd been pulled into. Michael had convinced them to approve a sale that was illegal from the start. "There's more," I continued, pulling out another stack of papers. "In the past 3 weeks, there have been some interesting movements in our accounts. Transfers that don't quite add up." "That's enough." Michael slammed his hand on the table. "I'm the CEO. Dad chose me." "Did he?" I asked quietly, "because I have something else here you might want to see." I pulled out my final piece of evidence, a document I found buried in Dad's personal files at home. It was dated just 2 days before his death, and it told a very different story than the one Michael had been spreading. "This is Dad's last amendment to the succession plan," I said, passing it to Bernard. "He didn't choose you as CEO, Michael. He chose both of us as co-CEOs. But you knew that, didn't you? That's why you rushed to announce your promotion at the funeral, before anyone could read the actual documents." The color drained from Michael's face. Emma grabbed his arm, whispering something urgently in his ear. But it was too late. The damage was done. Bernard cleared his throat again, but this time there was anger in his voice. "Michael, is this true? Did you deliberately mislead this board?" "Of course not." Michael stood up, straightening his tie. "This is clearly a forgery. Sarah's jealous. She's always been jealous." "The document has been notarized," I interrupted, "and the notary remembers Dad quite clearly. She said he was very specific about wanting both his children to lead together." Emma's perfectly manicured nails were digging into Michael's arm now. I could almost see the wheels turning in her head, realizing that her $1 hotel purchase was slipping away. "Furthermore," I continued, "I've asked our accountants to prepare a full audit of all transactions since Dad's passing. They should be here any minute with their preliminary findings." As if on cue, there was a knock at the boardroom door. Thomas from accounting entered, carrying a thick folder. He nodded to me before addressing the board. "We found several irregularities," he began. "Most notably, a series of transfers to an offshore account that—" "Stop!" Emma suddenly burst out. "This is harassment. Michael, we don't have to listen to this." But Michael wasn't looking at her. He was looking at me, and for the first time since we were kids, I saw real fear in his eyes. He knew what those account transfers would reveal. "The board needs to vote," Bernard said firmly. Given this new information, I moved to immediately freeze the ownership transfer and suspend all recent financial decisions pending a full investigation. "Seconded," said Margaret Peters, another board member who'd known us since we were children. "All in favor?" Bernard asked. Every hand went up except Michael's and Emma's. "This is ridiculous," Emma sputtered. "We'll sue." "Well, with what money?" I asked mildly. "Your $1 investment, or were you planning to use the hotel's funds? Because I've already frozen all the accounts." Michael sank back into his chair, defeated. Emma stormed out of the room, her heels clicking angrily down the hallway. "Michael," Bernard said, his voice heavy with disappointment, I think you should leave while we discuss next steps. Sarah, please stay. As Michael slunk out of the boardroom, I felt no satisfaction, only sadness for what he tried to do, and gratitude that Dad had taught me to always pay attention to the details. The next 2 hours were intense. The board voted to temporarily suspend Michael from all duties pending a full investigation. They appointed me interim CEO with the understanding that once everything was sorted out, Dad's wish for co-leadership would be honored if Michael could be trusted again. When I finally left the boardroom, I found Joe waiting outside. "Miss Sarah," he said, smiling, "the staff would like to see you in the lobby." I followed him downstairs to find almost every employee gathered in the grand space. As I descended the stairs, they began to applaud. Maria, our head housekeeper who'd worked here for 30 years, stepped forward. "We heard what happened," she said. "We want you to know we're all behind you. This is how it should be." I felt tears pricking at my eyes. "Thank you," I managed to say. "All of you. This hotel isn't just a business, it's a family, and that includes every one of you." Looking at their faces, people who'd watched me grow up, who'd helped teach me every aspect of the hotel business, I knew I'd done the right thing. This wasn't just about stopping Michael's scheme. It was about protecting our father's legacy and the livelihoods of everyone who worked here. As the staff dispersed back to their duties, I walked through the lobby, running my hand along the polished wood of the reception desk. The afternoon sun was streaming through those same windows, but this time it felt warm, welcoming. My phone buzzed with a text from Michael. "You'll regret this." I didn't bother responding. Instead, I opened my email and began drafting a message to all staff, outlining the changes and assuring them their jobs were secure. There would be no modernization plan, no mass layoffs like Emma had been planning. The lakeside resort would stay true to what had made it special for 3 generations, its charm, its history, and most importantly, its people. As I worked, I glanced up at the family photographs on the wall. Dad's face smiled back at me, and I could almost hear his voice. "Details matter, Sarah. They tell the real story." He'd been right, as usual. The details had saved us all. The full extent of Michael's deception became clear over the next few days. As the forensic accountants dug deeper into our books, they uncovered a pattern of financial manipulation that made the $1 sale look almost innocent in comparison. "Miss Harrison," Thomas said, laying another report on my desk. "We found something concerning." His face was grim as he pointed to a series of transactions. "These transfers to Coastal Developments LLC. They started small, just after your father's hospitalization, but they've grown significantly." I leaned forward, studying the numbers. Nearly $300,000 have been funneled into this company over the past 3 months. "What's Coastal Developments?" "That's just it," Thomas replied. "The company was registered 2 months ago. The owner is," he hesitated, "Emma Sullivan, your brother's wife." The pieces suddenly clicked into place. Emma's constant push for modernization, her insistence on bringing in outside contractors for simple renovations, even her eagerness to take ownership of the hotel. It had all been part of a larger scheme. I was about to respond when my office door burst open. Michael stormed in, his face red with anger. "You froze my accounts?" he demanded. "All of them, even my personal ones." I met his gaze steadily. "The board froze everything pending investigation, including the funds you transferred to your wife's mysterious development company." He faltered for just a moment before recovering. "That's a legitimate business venture." "Save it, Michael," I cut him off. "We found the contracts, the inflated invoices. Did you really think nobody would notice you paying Emma's company $50,000 for design consultations that never happened?" Thomas quietly excused himself, leaving me alone with my brother. Michael's anger seemed to deflate, replaced by something that looked almost like desperation. "You don't understand," he said, sinking into a chair. "Emma, she had these plans, big plans. We were going to transform this place into something modern, something profitable." "We're already profitable," I interrupted. "Or we were, before you started bleeding us dry." "What happened to you, Michael? When did money become more important than family?" He laughed bitterly. "Family? Is that what you call it? Playing Dad's perfect protege, always following the rules, making me look bad. You did that all on your own." I pulled out another report. "Care to explain why you canceled our staff's health insurance while upgrading your office with $30,000 worth of furniture?" Before he could answer, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Maria. Emma's in the lobby, making a scene. She's threatening to go to the press. I stood up. Excuse me, your wife is throwing another tantrum. When I reached the lobby, Emma was indeed putting on quite a show. She gathered a small crowd of guests and was loudly proclaiming how I had stolen her hotel, how Michael was the rightful CEO. Emma, I said calmly, approaching her. Let's discuss this in private. Private? She scoffed. Like how you privately conspired with the board to rob us? Everyone should know what kind of person you are. I noticed Joe discreetly ushering guests away from the scene. Then I saw something else, a familiar face entering through the main doors. Bernard Wells, accompanied by two serious-looking men in suits. Mrs. Sullivan, one of the men said, stepping forward and showing a badge. I'm Agent Carter with the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit. We'd like to ask you some questions about Coastal Developments, LLC. Emma's face went white. She looked at me, then at the agents, then turned and ran toward the exits. She didn't get far. Hotel security, already alerted by Joe, blocked her path. Let me guess, I said to Bernard as the agents led Emma away, you found something else. He nodded grimly. The money they took from us, it wasn't the first time. We found similar patterns at two other hotels where Emma worked in marketing. Different companies, same scheme, inflated contracts, fake consultations, money disappearing into shell corporations. I felt sick. She was doing this before she even met Michael. She was doing this before she even met Emma, came a voice behind me. I turned to see Michael, standing there looking defeated. Her real name is Emily Sanderson. I found her ID last night after you froze the accounts. She's done this before. The implications hit me like a physical blow. Michael hadn't just betrayed our family, he'd been conned by a professional fraudster. Somehow, that made it both better and worse. Why didn't you come to me? I asked quietly, when you first realized what she was doing. He shook his head, not meeting my eyes. I was in too deep. She knew I'd helped her. Said she'd make sure I went down with her if I tried to stop it. He laughed hollowly. Guess I'm going down anyway. Agent Carter approached us. Mr. Harrison, we'll need you to come with us as well. We have some questions about your involvement. I watched as they led my brother away, his shoulders slumped in defeat. Bernard placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. You did the right thing, Sarah, he said. Your father would be proud. But all I felt was tired. Protecting the hotel had cost me my brother, exposed a criminal conspiracy, and shaken our family's foundations. Yet somehow, standing in that lobby our grandfather had built, I knew we would survive this too. Maria appeared at my side, holding a cup of tea, Earl Grey, my favorite. The staff is asking if we're still having the anniversary celebration next week, she said. I thought about it. The Lakeside Resort's 70th anniversary celebration had been planned months ago, before Dad's death, before all of this. Part of me wanted to cancel it, but yes, I decided. We're celebrating. This hotel has survived 3 generations of challenges. It'll survive this too. Maria smiled. That's what your father would say. I took a sip of tea, letting its warmth chase away some of the day's chill. Tomorrow would bring more challenges, dealing with the press, reassuring our guests, helping the FBI with their investigation. But for now, I just stood in our beautiful lobby, watching the sunset paint the lake in shades of gold, and knew that somehow we would make it through. 1 year later, I stood in the exact spot where Michael had told me about selling the hotel to Emma. The lobby looked different now, not because we'd modernized it as Emma had wanted, but because we'd restored it to its original glory. The wooden panels gleamed, family photos had been reframed, and a new display case showcased items from the hotel's 7-decade history. The anniversary celebration had turned into a turning point for us. Instead of hiding from the scandal, we'd faced it head-on. I'd given one interview to the local paper, telling our story honestly, how we discovered the fraud, stopped it, and were committed to maintaining the hotel's legacy. The community had rallied around us, and bookings had actually increased. Michael had pleaded guilty to lesser charges in exchange for testifying against Emma, or Emily, as she was now known to everyone. She'd been sentenced to 15 years for multiple counts of fraud. The investigation had uncovered similar schemes at 6 other hotels across 3 states. Miss Sarah? Joe's voice pulled me from my thoughts. The new guests are here for check-in. I smiled, watching as a family approached the front desk. They were our first guests in the newly renovated East Wing, where we'd finally fixed the issues Michael had been ignoring while funneling money to Emma's fake company. "Welcome to the Lakeside Resort," I heard Joe say warmly. "We're celebrating our 70th year of family hospitality." Later that evening, I sat in my office, not the CEO's office. I turned that into a small museum of hotel memorabilia, going through the day's reports. Our profits were up 20% from last year. Staff morale was at an all-time high. And we just won a regional award for historic preservation. A knock at my door made me look up. Bernard stood there, holding a familiar-looking envelope. "It's from Michael," he said softly. "The guard said he insisted on you getting it today." I took the envelope, waiting until Bernard left to open it. Inside was a letter, written in my brother's unmistakable scrawl. "Sarah, I've had a lot of time to think in here. About Dad, about the hotel, about what I threw away. I watch the news, see how well the hotel is doing under your leadership, and I feel proud and ashamed at the same time. I'm sorry, not just for the fraud or the lies, but for forgetting what Dad always taught us. That the hotel wasn't just a business, it was our heritage, our responsibility to the community. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that you were right. You were always right. Take care of our legacy. Michael." I folded the letter carefully, placing it in my desk drawer. Maybe someday I'd respond, but not yet. The wounds were still too fresh. That night, as I did my final walkthrough of the hotel, a tradition Dad had started and I'd maintained, I stopped at the wall of family photos. We'd added a new one recently, taken at the anniversary celebration. Me surrounded by our long-term staff, all of us smiling proudly in front of the hotel. Dad had always said the true measure of a hotel wasn't its profits or its amenities, but the memories it created for others. Looking around at the families enjoying their evenings, the couples celebrating special occasions, the children playing in the lobby just like Michael and I once did, I knew we were still creating those memories. The Lakeside Resort had survived its darkest chapter, emerging stronger and more true to its roots than ever. And somewhere, I hoped Dad was watching, proud of the legacy he'd left in my care. As I headed home that evening, the setting sun painted the lake in familiar shades of gold and purple. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new guests, new memories to create. But for now, I was exactly where I needed to be, carrying forward a family tradition, one day at a time.